All right, everybody. Hey, my name's Nick Peterson. I've been in the game industry for about coming on 8 years now, I think. My first gig was in Seattle at a small studio. We worked on a pirate MMO called Pirates of the Burning Sea. And then I worked at Gearbox Software for almost 4 years on Borderlands 2, Aliens, and Duke Nukem. And now I'm actually working for another small company out of Rockwall here in Texas on a mobile game for iOS. So I'm here today to talk to you guys about VFX in games, and also kind of relating more toward mobile. Mostly because mobile's had this meteoric rise in popularity. I mean, I saw some people playing on their 3DS, and I'm sure people playing on their phones. It's getting more and more important as the years go by. So one of the things that's happened is that Unity has been kind of the tool of choice for most mobile stuff. Just recently, Unreal released Unreal 4 for, I think it's, what is it, $19.99 a month, I think? And they're... It's 19. Is it 19? Yeah. And they're going to be having, PC, Xbox, PS3, and mobile. So that's going to kind of fracture the whole ecosystem a little bit, and we'll see how things go. But I think that there's still going to be a lot of use here, and there will be a lot of use on the Unreal side as well. So what I wanted to show you guys first off is kind of what we're working on at work. The game that we're working on, it's called Fates Forever. It's an iOS game for the iPad, and it's basically a 3 versus 3 MOBA. And this is kind of sneak peek. We're only released in, I think, 1 or 2 countries over in Europe right now. And I'm not going to show all the game, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of what iOS is capable of as far as quality and art. So this is our game. This is full real-time 3D. Now, keep in mind, like, we're doing a lot of tricks. Uh-oh, lights. This is kind of hard to see. So we're doing a lot of tricks in 3D where we're using a lot of 2D planes to kind of mimic 3D. So like all these bushes are 2D, right? Same with some of these objects floating in here. And then a lot of the objects are also 3D as well. Like this is actually a 3D mesh, but we don't draw the back faces, so we save on performance there. How many of you have played a MOBA? Probably League of Legends and Dota 2, right? Yeah. Pretty common. Yeah, so this is kind of our interpretation of that on a mobile device. So it's 3v3, we have top lane, bottom lane, and then obviously you get to pick your characters, and then here's our skills. The whole thing is designed around touch, which is really cool. It's actually really, really fun to play. With the mouse, it's a little bit more like you would experience on your typical MOBA. But with touchscreen, it's a lot more fun. You've got, this skill you just tap, and he fires off his skill. But let's see if I can get, actually I have a cheat menu here. Let me go ahead and cheat. Level up, there we go. So what I mean by touch enabled is this guy here. If I tap that, we get this cool ring, and then you click and swipe in the direction that you want to go. So now I want to attack him, right? He'll go trying to get him. So we've reimagined it for mobile. Now all the effects that you see here, this is all my stuff. I'm the only effects artist at the company. We've been working really hard trying to make the game feel more impactful and just feel good, So like, for instance, when you level up, you get this really nice, cool effect that flies up into the air and shows you, hey, you leveled up, rather than being just kind of hard to see. Let's get him. There we go. Oh, I died. And I can go ahead and just respawn here with my little cheat. There we go. So this is what I've been working on for the better part of, I think, about 7 months now with our company. The name of the company is Hammer and Chisel. With effects, it's really interesting. When you work at a company that's bigger like Gearbox, you're typically only going to be doing just effects, okay? So you'll build things like, the glows and the smokes and the other things that you see that are happening here. That's what you'll do. And then you'll give it to a designer or a coder or somebody like that, and they'll take your content and they'll hook it up in the game. So for instance, in Borderlands 2, when you shoot your gun and it has the gun effects at the end of the barrel, we would make those, and then the designers would hook them up to the gun. Since it's literally only me at this company, I do all the effects. I have to hook them up. I have to make sure that they work on the characters. I have to do a little bit of code. I do a little bit of shader work for the effects. I do animation. I kind of wear a lot of hats, which sounds like a lot, but what's really cool about it, though, is that it keeps you on your toes a little bit, and it makes you more valuable, right? You'll hear a lot of, like that little animation that happens there at the top where it says your tower's under attack. I animated all that because they didn't have anybody to do it. So like, well, hey, let's make it look cool and just put it together. Anyway, what I was going to say is that a lot of people tend to think that you have to super specialize in one thing. I think that, again, if you're going to go for a larger company, I think that's accurate. But if you're going to be working in mobile or a small studio, I mean, we have 15 people total, and of those 15, 5 of us are artists. So we have one character guy, we have one environment guy, myself, one animator, and the art director. That's it. And we do all the art. So it's a little bit different in that regard. So you do have to wear those hats. You do have to be able to say, you know, I can be an effects guy, I can do little animation, I can be a tech artist, I can do all those things. Now that doesn't mean you have to be, you know, really good at all those other things, but you have to be passable enough to say, yep, I can do this, and I can show you that I've done that. So let's talk about Unity a little bit. Unity is an interesting tool. I used Unreal 3 for 4 years at Gearbox. That's what we use for Borderlands and the other products there. There's a lot of really great tools in that platform for content creation. They make some things really easy and really nice. Unity is interesting in that way because Unity kind of relies on coders a little bit more to create the kind of the back end that you plug everything into, right? And the tools aren't quite as robust up front, but the nice thing is that they are a little bit more customizable, okay? Let me show you what I mean here. So this is our scene. That's the scene that we just saw. That's all the content there. Everything's broken up into, you know, HUD, camera, the actual arena, which is, you know, this giant thing up here. Okay, that's that guy. And then, you know, characters, right? We have all this stuff split up. So let me bring up, let's see here. Lychee, he's cool. Lychee is one of our healer characters. And here he is. So he's this like kind of fun-loving little red panda. He looks really kind of goofy, but he's a healer, and he takes seeds out and throws them at enemies and can ensnare them and heal them and things like that. And I get to make those effects. So over here, I have our little effects folder. And then in our game, we have 2 different things. We have abilities and buffs. So buffs would be anything that's considered a heal or something that happens over time. That's like a buff, right? And then an ability is when he, you know, throws an item out into the world, or he does something that's a one-time use. That's an ability. So for instance, let's click ability here, and Pedal Storm is one of his abilities. And let me see if I can remember which one it is. It's been a while since I've touched this one. So that didn't look like much, just on its own right here. It just looks like these kind of pedals that are just kind of floating up and down, right? And then the swish on top. Now, the thing to remember about Unity is that it is component-driven, okay? So all these things on the right here are considered components. You guys have probably learned some of the stuff, I'd imagine, so you're probably right at home with it. Now, in this case, we have the way that I set this up, because Unity allows you to, what do you call it? Basically, you can throw sub-objects inside of parent objects, right? So I can take, for instance, the, it's hard to see up here. Where's my stuff? Yeah, right here. So it's got an animation that's happening on the ability, and when that happens, he takes his staff and swings it above his head and twirls it, right? So when I made the effect, all I really needed to do, because he's twirling his actual staff, is do this. So in game, those things go up and down, but it's also twirling at the same time, and they go outward, so it actually looks cohesive. This is kind of the downfall to Unity compared to Unreal, where I don't necessarily get to see those pieces all working together until a coder hooks them up for me. You see what I'm saying? So that's a little bit unfortunate, but the nice thing is that it does have an animation system down here. And actually, I think, yeah, see that spin right there? See what it's doing? That's spinning the base object. So if I hit simulate, hopefully if I can time it right, that's the hard part. I'm not getting it. So you can see it actually flies outward. So this is what I do all day long. I get to mess with creating content, and I get to mess with trying to make the content work, which is tough sometimes. Let's see if we can show you another character here. Or maybe one of the other effects, we can show you that. So location impact, this should be the actual heel that happens, yeah. So this game takes place, you know, kind of a 3/4 angle view here, like this. So get some nice glows, and it's just a heel effect. So let's talk about the effects side of things as far as what you need to be good at to be an effects artist in the industry. You need to be technically minded. Okay, you need to be able to say, okay, I don't know how to use this tool yet. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to spend a day or two on it and figure out at least enough to start creating content. And then as you create that content, you get better and better and better, and you can create better content, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is that, as I mentioned, you do need to wear multiple hats. Okay, I would say that animation is actually very important for a VFX artist. Okay, and the reason why is because you're dealing with motion. I mean, that's primarily what VFX is, right? So you're dealing with things like squash and stretch. You're dealing with things like making sure that, you know, when you fire a gun in, say, Borderlands, right? You fire that gun off, and at the end of the barrel, when it does its effect, you don't want it to just flash on and then flash off necessarily, right? It is very fast. It might take a portion of a second. It might be 0.2 seconds that thing's on the screen, right? A very, very small amount of time. But the thing is that you want to make a little bit of an animation up and then a little bit of an animation back down. So it comes into view very quickly and then it fades out very quickly, but it tricks the eye in just that minute fraction of a second into actually feeling like there's something going on there, okay? And that's the things that you have to think about. So with stuff like this, you know, like the base glow that just happened right there, like when it comes in, we don't just pop it into existence. We want to scale it up so it feels like there's an area of influence, right? And then when it goes away, you don't want it to just disappear and pop out of existence there either. You either want to scale it down or you can fade it out, okay? And to do so in most of the tools, and it's been a while since I've worked in Unreal, but I know that their particle system also has this guy, which is the animation editor. This thing is super, super important. One thing that I see a lot of newer people doing when they start getting into effects, and older people actually, is they don't mess with their curves, okay? As I mentioned, when you're an animator, and Chris, you know this, like you have to mess with those curves. You have to make those curves have, you know, a nice smooth in and then up and then a nice smooth out, right? So those are things you have to think about. Let me see if I can find a character here and show you the curve editor. Let's just use this. Okay, so this is this kind of big ring blast effect that happens, all right? And again, our game camera is kind of this top view with the ground running through it. So this ends up looking like this kind of powerful effect. The other thing that's a little bit weird, you'll notice a disconnect here. The smoke goes out a lot further than the inner ring does. It's because the editor actually runs at a different rate than our game does. So it looks right in game, but it doesn't look right in the editor, which is really annoying. But that does happen. So when this goes off, you'll notice the smoke, as it flies outward, it comes out real quick, and then toward the end, it slows down. Okay, do you see what I'm saying right here? All right? That's the kind of stuff that I mean when I'm talking about curves. You want to make sure that you think about those things. Because in real life, when smoke comes up, say you're looking at a campfire, okay? When that smoke is at the very bottom, it's got a lot of heat there because that campfire is very hot. So the smoke rises very quickly. And once it gets up in the air, well, what happens? It starts cooling off, right? So then the smoke stops rising so quickly, and it just kind of, you know, disperses out into the air. So when you make effects like campfires, and you see this all, seriously, start looking at games and start looking at their fires. You'll notice professionals do it, where they'll have the smoke just go, it looks weird, it feels funny. Most of us don't notice it because we're not thinking about it, right? But once you've tuned into that, you notice it, okay? So you want to make it feel like the way things actually work in real life. So let's go look at the dust ring here, which I believe is that one. Once again, it's been a while since I've touched this guy. So there's the shape. Gosh, it's hard to see. So here's color over life. This is kind of a curve, although it's not as controllable. You know, and again, you guys have used Unity. One thing to keep in mind here, you'll notice that, so it starts out faded. It comes into full view right here. Fades out to 57 alpha right here, and then stays that almost till the end, but not all the way to the end. Okay, now the reason why I did that was because when that smoke's coming out, I didn't want it to fade out at the very end of its life when the smoke stops completely. I wanted it to fade out as it was still moving, okay? keep those things in mind when you're creating this stuff. And then same as size over life. Let me open up. Gosh, this is hard to see, Chris. All right, there we go. So this is, I believe, oh, which curve are you? Okay, so here's the size over life curve. So what I said before, where a lot of people will just not touch curves, oops, you'll see them end up looking, oh, come on, like this. They're just straight, okay? You don't want that. You do actually want a curve on there. So does everybody know how this system works? Does this system make sense to people, right? So if I drag it down here, it's going to start out real small, and then it'll ramp up faster until it gets to the top, and then it'll slow down a little bit again. But when you create these curves, you got to think about and test. You want to test. You want to do as much iteration as you possibly can while you're working on effects. You might say, I want this guy to start out real small and stay small until the very end. Maybe that'll look cool. So that's what that curve does, right? And then, the other way, you could say, well, I want it to start out tiny but get real big real fast and then stay big toward the end, right? That's what this curve does. So keep in mind that you want to mess with this stuff all the time. You want to do different tests, see what it looks like, see what it feels like, see if it makes sense for the effect, and then do that to your other effects as well. Another thing that's really important that I've noticed people forget is rotation over lifetime. With things like smoke, when you pop the effect off, the initial pop, you don't want your smoke just to be the same texture, looking the same way, just going like this, right? Because it looks bad, it looks computery. We don't want it to look computery. So what you do is you set yourself a random rotation when it starts. So you have one smoke this way and then say another smoke this way, right? And then you tell it, go ahead and rotate at the start. And in this case, it's rotating at 400 units per second, or degrees, or whatever the heck it is. And then as the lifetime goes, it slows down real quick, right? Now, you don't want to get rid of that rotation at the very end, because then you're assuming that that smoke has lost all of its energy, which it probably wouldn't in real life, unless it's just dissipated, right? So you'll notice that toward the end here, it's not quite zero. It's close, but it's not quite zero, okay? That makes sure that there's always a little bit of rotation on there. It's those subtleties. It's those subtleties that make a big difference in the way that your effects can look. Does anybody have any questions so far? No? Okay. Let's go ahead and let's jump back to the game and just take a look at that a little bit. We'll talk about some effects in there. And let's see here. I need to yank out the other stuff, otherwise it'll show up in the base world of the game. All right. So the art team at the company is basically a bunch of ex-id, ex-Gearbox, and gosh, I don't remember the other company, but ex-id and ex-Gearbox employees, basically. A lot of really talented guys. So let's see, what do we want to talk about here? Effects is faking, right? You're faking stuff. Typically speaking, when you're working on a game, whether it be on PC or console or mobile, you have to fake a lot. Because what ends up happening is the game is being made, you're constantly worried about performance, right? So you're constantly saying, oh man, our game's running at 22 frames per second. We really need this thing to run at 30. So who's the first person that they're going to come to when they say that it's running bad? Well, it's the effects guy, yeah. They say, your stuff's too expensive, right? So 9 times out of 10, we have to go back in and look at our effects and try to cut them down. Or maybe we can fake something and still make it look as good as it was, but just try to fake stuff out a little bit. We do a lot of faking in this game, and it's necessary. A lot of the effects, instead of having like rocks, for instance, gosh, I died again. Let me respawn here, and I'm going to give myself like 4 levels. Yeah, that's me.
Fight like a man. He's fighting like a man who's cheating.
That's right. All right, so when I hit the ground here with this, if it'll work, there we go. See those little rock bits that flew up in the air? Like, we don't actually want those to be models, right? You might be able to get away with that in a next-gen game, if you're talking Xbox One or PS4. Yeah, you could probably do that with GPU particles. This is a mobile device. We don't have GPU particles, so we have to fake things. So all the little rock bits are just, they're textures. It's a square texture with 4 different, rocks on it, and then we just say, pick a random rock, and then we rotate it and give it motion to actually feel like it's a rock. We had to do a lot of that in Borderlands. It was a very, very common thing on the Xbox 360 and PS3 and PC. Did anybody play the PC version with NVIDIA PhysX enabled? Yeah, like it goes nuts, right? I mean, you shoot the ground and it's like rocks just flying everywhere. Well, that's because it's GPU particles, so you can get away with it. GPU particles hasn't hit mobile, and it probably won't for quite some time, if I had to take a guess. We're probably 3 to 5 years out on that front. But having said that, these things are really impressive. We're looking at a game here that's got, the characters are anywhere between probably 2,500 and 4,000 polys. The game world is pretty high poly, really. The difference is that, again, we're very smart with the way we have to build things. So we don't draw back faces of geo, right? We don't draw things that are out of screen. So we get to kind of concentrate all the processing on what you're seeing. Oh, get him. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, I mean, this is kind of what I do all day long. I get to play our game. I get to test things out, make sure things look right. We're starting to add a lot more things into the UI, like you see these little guys flashing, trying to tell you, hey, you can level up. You've got new skills. Just again, make it feel more impactful and more kind of user-oriented. And I'm dead again. So then, you play through the game, Let's say you win. And I have a cheat button for win, too. So this, again, this is stuff that I get to build. I get to say, hey, we need this cool kind of victory screen, Can you do it? Well, no, I don't know. Maybe, That's the answer. And we have one of our artists, he's a UI artist, Eli. Dude's awesome. He's the one that created all the art for the stone and the text. He's our UI artist. So he gets to create that stuff, and then I get to take it and I get to animate it and put shaders on it and do stuff with it. So like the confetti right here and the fireworks is all stuff that I got to do. The confetti is actually a really happy accident. It's kind of funny. They were like, hey man, the victory screen's cool, but we really want it to feel like a little bit over the top. And I'm like, how about confetti and fireworks? They're like, okay, So I made the fireworks, and then the confetti. I was thinking, man, confetti, it's glittery, right? When you drop it in the air, you see when it rotates in the air, it catches the light just right, and you get that little glint as it falls down. So what I did was I made a sub-UV texture. So there's 6 textures or so of each shape, and I actually used Blender, and I just rotated it, I think 45 degrees each time, and rendered that out into a strip. And then as this guy falls, it flips through that strip, and one's got a really nice highlight on it. So as it falls, it looks like it's catching the light. It's a trick. There's no real-time lighting, but it gets the point across that, hey, it's confetti, and it feels like confetti. Oh, this is new, too. So this also is stuff that I got to do just recently, which is a lot of fun. The animation here, these are all 2D objects. Yeah, that's all temp. But they asked, like, we want this stuff to feel better and a little bit cooler, because before it was just we'd have a 2D item pop into view and then that was that, right? Well, that's not as fun. It's not as engaging. So, like, what can we do? So then we sat down and we talked about it for a while, and I think, well, it'd be a lot more fun if we had some animation in there and we had some effects playing on there and made it just look cooler and feel cooler, And then when you tap it, it does a cool animation, like you're actually tapping it and goes in and then pops back out and swings away. Those are the things that, you guys, if you're interested in VFX, and I know you are, you have to think about those. You have to really kind of push those things into what you're building to kind of take that extra step. Right? And again, that's kind of what separates the better VFX artists from the guys that are just kind of pushing buttons. And I say that because realistically, a lot of these disciplines that we do in games, you could be that person that just pushes buttons and makes work, right? But when you look at a character artist that knows how to build a character, knows anatomy, knows skeletal structure, knows how to create really cool caricatures of faces, and then you look at the guy that's been doing it for a couple of years but didn't really care to learn all those things, you can see a difference between them, right? That's what I'm saying. I'm not saying that either one is not talented, just that one of those people is going to excel and do better than the other one. Yeah. Did you guys have any questions about the game?
How long have you been working on it?
On the game total? I've been on for, I think, about 7 months personally. And then they were working on it for, I think it's been about a year. Year and a few months. Yeah.
Release date yet?
We don't know the release date yet, unfortunately.
It looks really cool.
Yeah, it's a fun game. It's very pretty. The art director that we have, his name is Brandon Kikowski. He was a concept artist at id for quite a few years. Very talented guy. He's done artwork for World of Warcraft trading games and some other games as well. So very talented dude. All the team I work with is really awesome. That's one of the benefits of working on a small team, just so you guys are aware. You get to know people really well, and you get to know how to work with those people really well.
Is it a free game or pay to play?
It would probably be free to play, yeah. Yeah.
That's how I got fired.
No $2. Yeah.
I mean, even if it's like $1.99, it's worth it.
Yeah, it's a pretty game. So basically, one of those other things I wanted to tell you guys is don't discount the smaller studio. A lot of people think, oh, I want that job at Activision, or oh, I want that job at Ubisoft. That's great, that's cool. But keep in mind that there are a lot of small studios out there, and there are a lot of small guys. I mean, we're like I said, we're a 15, 14 person team in total. There's 5 of us here in Texas. The coders are all in California. So we get to do some working back and forth over the internet, but it works. It works well, and again, you get to work with some cool people. So you get to know people very well. You get to work with people that are professionals, right? That have a lot of talent and energy because you are so small. And like I said, you have to wear so many different hats, right? So there's more energy. There's just more. It feels like there's more just caring, I guess, for their craft, you know. But again, I worked at both, so they're both fun. They're both good experiences. Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about like the business side of the company, like as far as you guys like raising capital for the game and like maybe the monetization that you guys are shooting for?
Sure. I don't know a whole lot about all that stuff, unfortunately. I can talk a little bit about it. We recently did a round of funding, and I think it was 8.6 million. Jason, the guy that runs our company, he's a very smart dude. He's a young guy. I think he's 28 or 29. And has anybody heard of OpenFaint? It was like an Xbox Live kind of attachment for iOS and Android years ago. It was like 07, 08. No, okay. Well, anyway, he sold it to some big company in China for a ton of money, and has decided to continue kind of making his own stuff. So he's business savvy, you know. He knows how to find investors and angel investors and things. As far as monetization goes, I mean, it is a MOBA. I mean, it sounded like quite a few of you had played MOBAs before, and typically, yeah, they're free to play, and then you get people on the sale for, you know, skins and characters and things like that. I'm not privy necessarily to all the exact details for our game, but that is typical for this genre. So, does that answer it well enough for you?
I just like people to be aware that, you know, the games are cool and like all this stuff, but there's a whole other side to it. There's the business side.
Oh yeah.
These companies actually like have people that work for them and have salaries and
Yeah.
that needs to get paid for, and there's reasons why that gets paid for.
Yeah. Like I mentioned, we're pretty small, but you know, a lot of the guys that I'm working with, the coders, have been in the industry for also, you know, 8 to 10 years. So those guys, you know, they demand a pretty high salary, right? So he's absolutely right. I mean, it is hard to get a business up off the ground and get moving. It's not to say if you have a great idea and you have a team of friends that want to get together and try to help you out making a game, sweet. Keep doing it. That's the best way to learn and the best way to get better. So, yeah.
Are you guys hiring right now?
We are not. The last hire that we did was a coder, and yeah, he's been pretty awesome so far. So.
Any plans to expand in the future? Or
I honestly couldn't say. I wish I knew. If you go to hammerandchisel.com, that's our website. You can check it out. I think somebody was raising their hand over here.
Yeah, other than Unity, what do you use to make your parts?
Oh, hey, good question. I'm not sure if you guys have a whole lot on here. You probably do. Believe it or not, I use Blender a lot. Yeah, you know, Blender is one of those things that whenever I say that, I use it at Gearbox too for quite a few things. And whenever I say that, people are like, Blender? Really? I'm like, yeah. Come on, it's not that bad, you know? Like, it's a decent piece of software, you know?
how do you feel about 2.7?
2.7?
Yeah, it's out.
Oh, the newest. I haven't played with it much. I think I'm still running 2.69.
I added a toolbar.
I don't like that. I don't like that. It's funny, people get used to a UI paradigm, right? And they change it just a little bit. You're like, oh man. So one of the other tools that I use is Maya. You could use 3D Studio for fume effects if you wanted to. You could use Houdini if you're privy to Houdini. That thing is expensive as all hell. But it's very cool. Let's see here. So in Maya, one of the tools that I like, and if you take my effects class, we go over this. That's right. Is 3D containers.
Advertising.
So what I'm doing here is, and we're just going to do a real quick, just simple, stupid smoke puff. This is what's called a voxel grid. How many people have heard of this? Couple. Cool. Sweet. So voxel grids are kind of becoming more and more used in games, right? For different things. You can use them in Unreal 4. You can create a voxel grid, create your verticity and your velocity in the voxel grid, and then export that to Unreal and use it for effects for GP particles in Unreal. So that's really cool. The downside is it's a ton of features built into this one little thing, and it can get very confusing. And I have no screen real estate, so this is going to be tough. So this is the voxel grid, and if you look at the bottom here, this is showing you roughly how detailed it is. This is really low detail. We're going to throw in, this is hard to see, add edit contents, and I'm just going to throw in a normal emitter right here. And it's going to drop this guy in. So if I hit play down here at the bottom, it's just going to create see that little puff right there? That's smoke. Give it some more frames, and they'll kind of rise up. So you can see it's some smoke, right? But it's really square. There's really not a whole lot of information there, so it looks bad. But you can see it. I mean, it actually spreads out and it does some cool stuff. So this is one of the tools I use. And let's see if I can get, Chris, I need a monitor. It's cool. So I'm going to double this resolution here to 60. And when you're dealing with voxel grids, whenever you change resolution or change any of the major settings, you have to rewind and then hit play again, because it has to resimulate from the very beginning. And now you'll notice it's a lot slower. It's because it's higher detailed, right? So I'll let that run for just a second here. Boring. This is actually a really good thing to talk about anyway, though, because this kind of stuff is becoming more and more important in the industry as the years have gone by. This is what Hollywood uses, right? Like Maya fluid effects was actually used extensively in the Avengers. It's a very common tool. Now, keep in mind that they've made changes to it, so it's a little bit more high-end than you just get with stock Maya, but it's still something that has a lot of power. I'm going to drop this down to 45. So when you're dealing with emitters, with voxel grids and fluids, you have an emitter and then you have a container. So this guy is the container, this is the emitter, and each one has their own settings. So I want to change the settings on this guy first, which is our emitter. If you go down here, we have 3 different options. We have density, which is smoke, heat, which is heat, and then fuel, which is, if you combine the heat and the fuel, you get combustion, right? But we're messing with smoke, so I'm just going to leave it on density. And if I turn this guy way up, let's say like, gosh, I don't know, 60, and then rewind it, now you can see it's a lot thicker and a lot faster, because it's more smoke, and more smoke, of course, creates heat, right? So it's going to rise faster. All right, so then if we keep going down here, turn that guy on. This is a freebie. You should always check it. And let's see here. Right here. So fluid emission turbulence, what this says is we're going to perturb the emission of this stuff here as it comes out of the emitter. And you'll see what happens here in just one sec. Rewind. Or not. There we go. You see a little kind of danced around for half a second there? That's just giving it a little bit of turbulence on the actual emission. So it's going to look a little bit different and emit a little bit different. That's all that does. It's way too high, though. It's still way too high, but that's right. Most of the content work that you're going to do when you're dealing with fluid systems is going to be on the actual container. And first things first, I want to turn on self-shadow. So now it looks like it's actually 3D. You see that? It's got a shadow. That's nice. That helps. And then high detail, all grids. Let's see here. So content details is where most of the actual magic happens. This is where you control all the different things that happen inside of this grid. So in this one, I'm just going to turn up swirl. And swirl, what that does is that creates a swirling effect inside of each box, inside of each voxel grid. And then it moves the swirl into the other voxel grids and creates motion. So now if we hit play, we should get a little bit more motion. Looking a little bit cooler.
You can export this directly into your engine then?
No. No. So what you have to do when you're dealing with things like this, what I'll do sometimes is I'll create a smoke effect, and I'll find a view that I like. Like say that I want the smoke to feel like it's rushing toward the camera, so I might move the camera up to the top here. And what you would do is you would actually take that view, right, and you would render out each frame, and then you'd turn it into a flipbook. Does everybody know what a flipbook looks like? Yeah. So you would just turn it into a flipbook, and then you can throw that into Unreal or Unity, kind of whatever, and it'll just flip right through those frames as your time goes by. Typically speaking, you're going to eat a lot of memory, right? Because you're looking at a texture page that could be anywhere between 2048 and 4096, depending on if you're on next gen or if you're on mobile. I think the animation or animated pages that I did for our game, I think, are 1024, so a little bit smaller. And I might be able to bring that one up. Let's see here.
Do you use After Effects at all?
A little bit. See if I can find that texture for you. Ah, there we go, right there. Photoshop. Does anybody else notice Photoshop CS6 is really slow? All right.
There are other CCs way better.
Cloud slower.
Is it? I haven't used it yet.
Yeah,
Okay, so yeah, so this is the texture page here. So basically what I did was just rendered out the frames like I was telling you. It just starts at, whoops, hello. It starts out as a little puff, and then it just kind of comes out from there. And then what I did was took this into After Effects. I put a little, you can see a little bit of kind of a motion blur on the first few frames. There's not much, but it's just a motion blur, so when it pops out, you get a little bit of kind of spikies. And then there's a script that I was given that converts each frame into a film strip in After Effects. So that's kind of the way that we do things for smoke effects. There's new ways to do this kind of stuff as well. This is like, how do I explain this? This is like current gen. So this would be like Xbox 360 and whatnot. The new ones, they're doing a lot of this, but they're also doing, oh God, like a flow map. Has anybody heard of a flow map? Yeah, so basically what you're doing is you're taking a smoke texture, or one of these if you have the right coder, and you're taking that texture and you're taking a UV texture that's been perturbed, so it's got some motion in the UVs, right? And then the UVs are actually adjusting the smoke texture over time. So then it makes it feel like the smoke is moving even though it's actually not. So there's no texture sheet. You have one texture for the smoke and you have one UV texture, and it just lerps between normal UVs and the perturbed UVs, and it makes it look like it's moving. It's very cool.
that saves on resources a lot, I bet.
It can, absolutely. You need a little bit more on the shader side of things because the shader's doing all the processing, but you don't need as much memory.
So it's like an animation sheet thing?
What's that?
So it's like an animation sheet that goes through each one of these things?
Yep.
It's like a frame?
Yep, that's what that is. So in Unity, if you're wanting to see where that's at, let's see if I can find, give me one sec here. Trying to think of what I've used recently with smoke. Well, I should have a material for that. Yeah, so this is a material here. So it just takes this, creates the material. And I think that's just set to alpha blend. And you know what? Let's just make a new one. Why not? So there's particles, and if you scroll down to the bottom here, it says texture sheet animation. Just click that guy. You have to tell it the tiles first. So I'm going to assign my material here. So as you can see, it just looks like a bunch of dots, right? But if you go into here and say, well, I know that that's 5 by 5. So I'm going to say 5x and 5y. So now they're just one flying out each time, right? Now you can see that like they are animating, but the lifetime is 5. I don't know why they picked 5 lifetime. It's kind of ridiculous. Let's say like 0.8, for instance. Okay, so now when we see those, they start out small and then they get bigger. Now again, we have a curve, right? Think about using that too, because you can adjust. That's one thing that's kind of nice about using the texture sheets like this, is because you can render it out a certain way, very linear, right? And then you can adjust the animation of of the flipbook inside of Unity or Unreal, just a little bit. You can't get a whole lot out of it, but you can say, well, you know, I want it to shoot up through the frames real quick and then slow down at the end. So you could do that right here. You could, exactly like I showed before, you just take this guy, go like that, and then this guy, and go like that. So now instead of, might not be very noticeable in here, but it's going to go up through the frames quicker until the end. And then I can break it. Does that make sense? These are really useful. And the nice thing about these is that if you create them correctly and you make it so you can adjust the color and the material, right, you can use it all over the place. And no one will be the wiser, because you're just faking it. You're saying, oh, yeah, this is a fire smoke, and oh, this one's a magic smoke, and this one's a, you know what I mean? So a lot of opportunity for making lots of different stuff. Any other questions?
What should students be trying to build into the portfolio, or whether, besides taking your class and experience?
For VFX specifically?
Yeah, for VFX or just in general.
Okay. So for VFX, like I mentioned before, animation is very, very important. The feel of your effect is very important. So best thing I could suggest, hope that's not me. The best thing I can suggest is to look at other people's portfolios. Get on Vimeo, get on YouTube. Find the names of a couple of guys that have done effects for a living and look at their reel, okay? And when I say that, look at some bigger name games. Ubisoft has a fantastic effects team, okay? Actually, let's see here. I think that's mine. Yeah, that's mine. Yay, demo reel. Whoa, that's loud. So what I'm trying to show here is things like, you know, there's blood spurts, there's sparks, there's dust floating through the air, things like that. If you can, when you're making a demo reel, if you can do it as a project with someone or make it feel like there's kind of a world around it, that's the best way you can go. If you just create, say, like a dungeon and you just throw some smoke in the dungeon, there's no story, there's no real feeling there. So then it's like, oh, okay, he made smoke. Who cares? You know what I mean? Unless you can really make that smoke just look amazing and be, you know, have really nice lighting and have really nice motion, then yeah, you'll take that step above. But those, you know, like that explosion right there, those are the important things. You do want the timing, you want the animation, okay? So you got that initial pop, and then you have the explosion, and then you have the stuff that happens afterwards. So most effects, when you build them for portfolio specifically, you do want to think about what happens at the beginning, what happens during the effect, and what happens at the end, okay? You don't just want it to be poof, right? It's boring. You do want those 3 stages because, I mean, think about most things in life, you know, for English speakers, right? With stories, we have a beginning, we have a middle, we have an end, right? So you do the same thing in your effects and the same thing in animations. You want to introduce the character, you want to squash them down when they're jumping, and then as they jump, you have a really nice stretch up, right? And then as they're coming back down, you squish them back up a little bit and then have them fall back down. So you're doing the same stuff, just in different tools, more or less. So this kind of speaks to doing a lot of different things. That's the other thing that's important in a portfolio. You don't necessarily want to just do just explosions or do just smoke or just guns, right? You want to have a variety of things because that shows that you're capable of doing the variety of things. Most studios that you're going to work in, you're going to do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of effects. I did almost all the weapon effects for Borderlands 2. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of effects. So you need to be able to, you know, make it feel like fire, make it feel like, they told us, they're like, oh, we're going to have a new gun type. It's an explosive explosion. It's like, what is an explosive explosion? What the hell does that even mean, right? Ben, you know what I'm talking about. So you have to take those things and you have to say, okay, well, I can make an explosion, but I can make it feel a little more poppy, right? Or whatever the case may be. But you do need to be able to do a multitude of stuff. So this was Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon Keep. Anybody play that? It was awesome. Yeah. In this scene, you know, they're like, hey, we want this cool maelstrom above the tower. Okay, cool. You know, let's let the effects guys do it, rather than the environment guys. You know, because that's what you'd think. You'd think that they would just say, yeah, environment guys, go ahead and do it. So I got a chance to build all that stuff out. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of learning too. So that's a Fume Effects explosion. That's 3D Studios Fume Effects plugin. That would be like the flipbook. You could take this, create a flipbook out of it, and then use it in like a distant explosion. You wouldn't want it up close because if your character can walk through it, it's just a big blurry texture. You know what I mean? Fire. These you can oftentimes get away with closer up if you create a flipbook of fire. Because fire is kind of amorphous, it doesn't really have to feel like there's real thick licks of flame right in your face. That was just a Maya fume effect or fluid system test. Another Maya fluid system test. So that was Aliens. Great game, right? Uh-oh. What did I do? I broke it. Okay, so yeah. I'm going to shut that off. Oh, come on. What is going on here? So this scene was actually a lot of fun, if I can get it to not go to the very end again. So all this stuff here that you're seeing, this is all effects. This is all a little bit of flipbook, a lot of faking it. Like these little blood drops are not actually, you know, spheres or meshes of any kind. They're just little circular textures, more or less. And I've taken those and I've adjusted the UVs as they're moving a little bit so they look like they're kind of doing this as they fly. And we have, you know, kind of tenderly looking textures that fly out. It's like the blood, kind of gross, but also kind of cool. This one, I didn't do the smoke, but I did do the effects for the big broken down ships in the ground here. Initially, that was just a big piece of metal that was just out in the distance. And I was like, man, you know, when a ship hits a planet, especially one as big as those ships, like it's going to fall apart internally and catch on fire everywhere. It should look like there's fire within it, and it's like it's melting off panels, and it just feels really cool and big, right? Because it's an issue of scale, right? If you got this big ship out there and it's just a big chunk of metal, it doesn't feel big. But if you do things like this and you make it feel like there's internal fire and combustion and things going on inside, right? It makes it feel huge. It makes it feel more epic. So with this, I did some of the blood impacts. I did the lighting. I did the smoke effects. It's actually a really cool engine, believe it or not. We had some really nice real-time lighting in that engine. Timed all this stuff, all the explosions, rocks, fire, lights. Wish you could actually see that. It's pretty gruesome. So yeah, so that was my demo reel. Point being that, you know, again, just think about things that'll set you apart from other people. You want to try to make sure that you think about motion, think about color, think about scale. Like I just mentioned with the ship, those things are very important.
I have a question totally off topic.
What's up?
So now that you're ex-Gearbox,
Yeah.
why was Aliens Colonial Marines such a fail?
Aww.
I mean, you said it. You just said it, so I felt like it was okay. I said
You know, I really don't know. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like Duke Nukem. You know, I think you set up expectations for years and years and years, and then people just expect the moon. You know, and you can't provide the moon. That's all I got to say.
It's a nice politically correct.
Yeah, that's right. Any other questions? Thoughts? Who's going to take my class?
You can point these kids to, like YouTube channels or anything else? Or I know some G-Hub's down now.
Yeah, I know that sucks. YouTube, you know, it's one of those things where, like, for 3D modeling, you can find a ton of resources. For animation, there's a ton of resources. For VFX, there's very few. There is a guy, man, I'm going to have to look up his website here. His name's Bill Cladis. I think he's worked for Midway and a couple other places. But he's got, IMBUFX, that's the name of it. IMBUFX. This is a good one. They're more or less, I don't want to say beginner, but they're close to beginner tutorials for particles. His stuff is specifically related to Unreal, which, like I mentioned before, was my life for damn near 4 years. But he's got some really cool stuff in Unreal 4, UDK, materials. He talks about materials. He talks about VFX. He talks about lighting for VFX, textures, flipbooks, lots of stuff. And they're cheap, too. I think they're like $10, $20 for most of them. These are all free, actually. That one's $13. This one's $13. They're pretty cheap. I've actually purchased myself. I purchased one of them. I don't remember which one it was. But it was good. He's a knowledgeable guy, and he's got a forum on his website, too, if you have questions. There's usually, I go on there. There's usually 3 or 4 other effects artists that have been in the industry for a while that talk on his forum as well. So if people come in with questions about Unreal or effects, they're willing to answer. YouTube does have some stuff. I think that it's a little bit hit and miss on there. Vimeo has a ton of stuff, however. But when I say that, I don't necessarily mean for game. I mean more for movies. But that's cool, because there's a lot of really great stuff you can learn just by watching film breakdowns and seeing how they're creating their fluids and seeing how they're creating their effects. So Vimeo is a great place to look as well. Yeah.
How in demand is a VFX gaming position?
Activision has been looking for an effects artist for the better part of a year, currently. Gearbox has been looking for one for 8 months, 9 months. Gosh, there's a couple other companies I know of that are fairly recent that have been looking for one for a while. Tim Schafer's company, I can't remember the name of his company. Thank you. He's looking for one. It's one of those things where it seems like it comes and goes, like waves a little bit. You know, you'll get a huge uproar for like, hey, we've been looking for dudes for a year, you know, and then they'll hire 1 or 2, and then they won't. Typically speaking, effects artists will stick around for quite a few years, so they won't need one for quite a while. But then when they do, they're usually open for a while because they tend to stay at the companies that they're at. They get treated well usually, so.
Basically, they're hard to find.
Yeah. And oftentimes, actually, what happens a lot is when a company is looking for an effects artist and they can't find one externally, they'll grab their tech artist and say, hey, how do you feel about learning effects? And most of the time, they say yeah, you know, but sometimes not.
You teach classes here at Richland?
I teach an online class.
Okay.
Yeah. For effects. It's fun.
Why did you leave Gearbox?
What's that?
Why did you leave Gearbox?
Why did people leave Gearbox?
Why did you?
Why did I leave Gearbox?
Yeah.
Different opportunity. Yeah. Any other questions, guys? About Unity, about the industry? Yeah.
Okay, in general, how much time does it take to like just render one smoke effect, and like from the beginning of the process to that, like how long does it take for you to create like one single effect?
You're talking a real-time effect?
Yeah.
Okay, so for a real-time effect, on average, I can probably do 2 in a day if I'm fast. If I want to be honest about it, usually a day for one good, solid effect. But it really depends, because when you start building these things, you start creating a library of things that you can use, right? So, you know, somebody will come to you and say, hey, I want a campfire. Oh, great, I've already created a smoke, I've already created a fire. It might take you 25 minutes. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
But if you're talking about things where you're starting from beginning at scratch with no textures, no materials, nothing, I'd say a day is for a nice effect, for a good high quality effect, a day is good. If you're going to start throwing in things like Maya fluids and pre-rendered animations and things like that, that time's going to go up. But they're reusable, so it's worth it usually in the end. Yeah.
How much do you recycle your effects?
Constantly.
Constantly?
Absolutely. Anytime I don't have to build a new one, that's fantastic.
Nobody notices?
Well, yeah, but that's okay. I mean, it's an expected thing, right? You do want to recycle stuff to a degree. I mean, you wouldn't want to see the same exact, explosion in a different effect, right? But you would say, okay, I'm going to use that base explosion. I'll change the timing a little bit. I'll change the color of it a little bit, and it'll feel completely different. And you've only spent 5-10 minutes making those modifications. Yeah. Any other questions?